development, and the government needs to be agile about that.
And she's exhausted, Queen Camilla, so she's taking a break for the first time since stepping in to lead the royal family after King Charles, of course, diagnosis with cancer. You won't believe how few royal engagement, however, she's carried out this year.
And unsolved burglaries are on the rise. Damning new figures show the police have failed to solve a single house burglary in nearly half of all neighbourhoods in England and Wales in the past 3 years.
And do you remember the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Smartly said every single burglary will be investigated, every single one. Well, there we are. In the last 3 years, half of them, no burglary solved. It's appalling. Because they say it's not important. It is. If you're burgled, it's horrible.
Horrible. If you've been a victim of a house burglary, what was your experience with the police? What reason did they give you as to why they may not catch the person who just let themselves into your house and help themselves to their stuff? gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address this morning. That and a lot more. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. £360 million worth of funding for UK manufacturing is set to be announced ahead of Wednesday's budget. £200 million will be invested in zero-carbon aircraft technology, with pharmaceutical and car companies also set to benefit. The Chancellor says it's aimed at helping the UK become a world leader in manufacturing to boost the economy. Although Jeremy Hunt has tried to play down expectations of tax cuts for the budget.
We have over 500,000 civil servants. Now, even to shave a degree off that would cut public expenditure by at least £1 billion, and that would be great. Back again in 2010, 2016, we had under, I think, around 400,000 civil servants, and that saved a significant amount of money. The spending, the costs alone, I think, came down to something like £11 billion. This is where we have to be again, to be an agile government that's fit in the sense of financially sound money, conservative principles, but actually making sure the public keep more of their money.
That was the former Home Secretary Priti Patel speaking on Breakfast this morning. George Galloway is due to be sworn in as the new Rochdale MP in the House of Commons later today. The Workers' Party of Britain leader won last week's by-election. The focus of his campaign was the ongoing war in Gaza, warning Sir Keir Starmer that his party would pay a high price for enabling and covering what he called the catastrophe. Galloway was a Labour MP for 16 years until his suspension from the party in 2003 after remarks made at the start of the Iraq War. Nikki Haley has defeated Donald Trump in the Republican primary in Washington, D.C. This is her first victory of the former president in this year's campaign to become the Republican presidential candidate. She lost in her home state of South Carolina, but she's now the first woman to win a Republican primary in US history. The only remaining challenger to Donald Trump in the race, she won almost 63% of that vote. However, Mr. Trump has a significant lead over Ms. Haley, and he's likely to face Joe Biden in the election in November. And pupils from low-income backgrounds in England are still behind in their maths grades compared with before the COVID pandemic. A new think tank report has revealed maths performance dropping back to 2017 levels for pupils in years 3 to 9. The research shows the disadvantage gap has widened from around 7 months to almost 9. That amounts to an average loss of over 4 months of learning in secondary schools and a loss of 2 months in primary schools. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning.
Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. We're going to be talking about the big moment today. The Workers' Party of Britain leader George Galloway will be sworn in the House of Commons. He won last week's by-election in Rochdale by a country mile.
We've got 59 parliamentary candidates ready to go, and we'll stand in, therefore, 70 Labour seats and either defeat them ourselves or cause their defeat.
score Labour seats. He means 60 seats,
does.
right? What a
He does.
strange way to speak. Well, he
Yeah.
described Starmer and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as two cheeks of the same backside, saying that he hopes they would get well and truly spanked. I was on telly on Friday, Andrew, when this broke. You weren't. I've been dying to know what you make of it.
Well, I absolutely expected him to win. It's a huge kick in the face for Labour in particular, because that is a Labour seat, Rochdale. It's their own fault because they chose a candidate who muttered and spluttered all those anti-Semitic tropes. But Galloway is a fantastic campaigner, a brilliant public speaker, and he is going to throw a massive spanner in the works for Labour, and he's going to cause huge problems in Parliament. We've already seen it, because I spoke to David Davis at the weekend, often on this programme. He was going to introduce Galloway, because you have two MPs have to introduce a new MP. He said, I disagree with him, but I fundamentally support his right to hold his views. However, he pulled out because his deputy, Chris Williamson, a former Labour MP, made such appalling remarks about Israel and refused to condemn Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel that he's withdrawn. So already he's in controversy.
I'm surprised that David Davis has withdrawn from that, because David Davis, above all other MPs, up to me, appears to be an advocate of free speech.
Certainly is.
So this demonstrates George Galloway is a massive thorn in the side, isn't he, of MPs of every particular...
Yeah, Labour in
political
particular, because that's who he's gunning for, because he's going to put candidates up where there's a large Muslim vote. There was a large Muslim vote in Rochdale, and that's how he won. This wasn't about Rochdale, this was about Gaza. When did we last have a by-election campaign which is all about a place 2,000 miles away?
When he stood up and said, this is for Gaza, I just couldn't really believe my ears and eyes. I grew up just around the corner from Rochdale. I spent a lot of my teen years in Rochdale, and the idea that that would happen in an area which has hideous socio-economic challenges in some places. Some of the most deprived parts of Greater Manchester are in Rochdale. Education is struggling there, and the idea that a very organised, very angry Muslim community got together, they grouped and they engineered this success. But it is democracy in action. What can you say?
Exactly.
Well, joining us now is political correspondent Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia. So George Galloway not even sat his bum on those seats yet in the House, and yet already causing ructions. What's going to happen?
Well, George Galloway is going to meet the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, before he gets sworn in to the House of Commons, and that'll be a very interesting meeting indeed. Lindsay Hoyle has told MPs to be kinder and nicer to each other. He is deeply concerned about MPs' safety, and George Galloway is essentially the embodiment of the division which Speaker Hoyle has been so keen to try and end in the House of Commons. So that'll be a fascinating meeting. And then we have the actual swearing in of George Galloway. As you mentioned there, David Davis was going to introduce him on a sort of free speech basis. He's now refused because of Galloway's views on Gaza. So he will now be introduced by Peter Bottomley, who's the father of the House, and his old comrade, Jeremy Corbyn. So that's starting off with a bang, if you like. Now, the future of George Galloway and the people around him is what's really interesting to people at the moment. George Galloway, we heard in that clip there, is going to be standing 59 different candidates for the Workers' Party of Great Britain. And he says he's planning to defeat Labour in these 60 seats. Well, will that be possible? Of course, as you mentioned there, we have George Galloway's election has proved that there is a constituent of people in the UK that who tend to be of the Muslim faith, who are prepared to vote in an MP for reasons which aren't anything to do with what's going on in Britain, because George Galloway was campaigning as the MP for Gaza. And of course, there are other constituencies as well as Rochdale which have huge Muslim populations. But whether George Galloway's party stands any chance of repeating this success anywhere else remains to be seen. As you said that, Andrew, George Galloway is a fantastic campaigner. Like him or loathe him, he's a charismatic personality. And of course, the Rochdale by-election was very, very unusual. Labour's campaign imploded entirely. So I don't think it's possible to sort of extrapolate this result into the general election, but it's certainly something that MPs will be keeping an eye on.
OK.
Fascinating, isn't it? Sarah Vine, I've known George Galloway for years, and I'm sure your paths must have crossed.
He's quite formidable, actually.
He is.
He's very charming. He really does have the gift of the gab.
Absolutely.
He's amazing. He's a brilliant, brilliant speaker.
There are few to match him, actually, when he's in full flow.
Yeah, he really is.
I mean, do you remember when he...
And he's clever. He's really clever.
Remember when he was called before those American congressmen?
Yeah.
And he absolutely turned the tables on them about sanctions busting. He was... And they were dumbfounded by his performance.
Yeah.
He's going to really turn Parliament upside down, isn't he?
Yes, I mean he's the Labour Party's reform problem.
Yeah.
You know, he's the other side of that coin. The Tories have got reform, and the Labour Party now have George Galloway. I'd say that he's quite a formidable opponent, actually.
Yeah.
He is just very charming. He really is charming. That's what he is.
And it's interesting because Olivia talking about him meeting the Speaker. The Speaker has appealed for MPs to be nice to each other. He said on Friday, "I hate the Prime Minister." I mean, that's it. Before he's even got in the... I hate the Prime Minister.
I know.
And we pretty much hate Keir Starmer too.
I mean, the thing is about Galloway is that he's an opportunist, and he knows what plays to his constituency, and you know he's playing his card very well. So
you know, this is history. This is the first MP since Winston Churchill to be entering the Commons in a fourth constituency.
Yeah.
Because he's been around the block quite a few times.
But I do think it's interesting that you know he is effectively the MP for Gaza.
He is.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that something that's, as you said earlier, Andrew, that something that's happening so far away has had such a direct consequence on British politics.
Is it also, does he represent a little bit, even though he is standing on this, the idea of calling for an unequivocal ceasefire in Gaza, is there also something about him being anti-establishment which appeals to people who may not necessarily feel very strongly about
I mean, a lot of people frame the frame the Israel-Palestine thing as a David and Goliath war.
Yeah.
Of course, it's much more complicated than that. But let's not forget that Galloway, you know, has openly supported Hezbollah. You know, he's got quite a... If you actually look at what he said in the past, you know, he's been a great supporter of Russia.
Yeah.
He's definitely... I wouldn't say he's on the side of the angels generally.
Well, and because he praised Saddam Hussein, he also said he was misrepresented, but we saw him say to Saddam Hussein to his face, "I salute your indefatigability and your courage."
Exactly. So, I mean, people just need to be aware that however charming he is, and he is definitely charming, there is quite a dark underbelly there, I think.
He triggered a speech from the Prime Minister, which some people thought, oh, general election, because the podium was put outside with the government crest on it. People thought general election. I didn't think for a general election.
No, I didn't either.
Completely mad. But he delivered what I thought was one of his better speeches.
I have to say, I thought it was a really, really good speech. I read it quite a few times. I mean, and he's not the world's... I mean, Rishi Sunak is not the world's greatest orator, I'm afraid. But that was a very sound and I thought very measured but very firm speech. It was the first real sign of kind of a vision and a leadership that I've seen in him, you know, and I think that's what people are crying out for. I think people have a general sense of, oh, everything is disaster at the moment. There's such a lot of malaise. Everyone's shouting at each other, arguing. There's all sorts of awful things happening. You know, whether it's Ukraine or Janjaweed or, you know, Gaza. And I think when the world feels so unstable, what you want is somebody who can come out and sort of crystallise a vision and say, these are the parameters, these are our boundaries, this is what we stand for, these are our values. And that's what I felt he really did. And I think if he does more of that, that's what people want.
But why would he choose the day of Galloway's election to come out and give that speech?
Because I think that he felt, and I think a lot of people feel, that it is alarming that a situation so far from home that is not, you know, our situation has affected British politics in such a way. And I think he also looks at Galloway's record and says this is a man who has supported, you know, dictators and not very nice people in the past. And here he is being ushered in on what is essentially a really tribal vote. You know, it's not like, you know, like we were saying, like your political correspondent was saying, this wasn't a by-election about local issues, about schools, about healthcare or anything. It was simply a binary, you know. And
yet he then packaged the far right, he said, with Islamic extremists.
All extremists.
But why, when he came... Why did he package people from all different levels of political... It felt a little bit mealy-mouthed, that, to me.
Well, because he doesn't... I mean, he has to be very careful not to sort of fuel these accusations against the Tory party of it being Islamophobic. So, of course, if you're writing a speech like that, you have to have a counterbalance.
Yeah.
So you have to remind people that it's not just... Extremism doesn't just exist on the left, and it's not just religious-based. It can also be, as you say, far-right. It can be a different type of thing. So I think that was just him, you know, making sure that he wasn't opening himself up to those accusations.
And it's interesting as well, because they actually saw the Labour leader embrace what he said.
Right, we've got to take a quick break. Sarah, don't go anywhere. I want to hear your views as well on these huge amount of unsolved burglaries in England. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Sadiq Khan, 6.3 million on a virtue signal, load of lines. Why is he spending the people's money in this way? And why is nobody saying anything? I want to hear from Suzanne Hall, the potential Conservative candidate, or Howard Cox, the potential Reform candidate who could potentially take this off Sadiq Khan. Why are they not speaking? This is ridiculous.
Well, it was sprung on everybody. Did you know about that?
I didn't know about it.
Nobody knows. So they're spending this money. They're spending £6.3 million, and no one knew about it. Where's the press? Where are the public consultations? No one knew. I think it's a good idea to rename the train lines, because all these train lines are there are like 6 of them, whatever, and they're all going all these different directions, and you tell someone to come, and you don't even know the name.
Yeah, but 6.3 million. Listen, if he wants to give me 6.3 million to come up with some virtue signalling lines, I'd like to know which advertising agency he employed to do this, how long it took him, and why he's even done it in the first place. Why has he done this?
He has done this with the virtue signalling because he's part of Team World. He's Rishi Sunak. It's this whole concept is every inclusiveness. There is no country. Nobody's English. Our own history is bad. Not my history, but whatever. The English history is bad. And it's a denial of history. It's Orwellian or something. Yeah. Not that I know
I think it's an absolute absurdity that Sadiq Khan should be doing that. He's got a knife crime epidemic, a crime epidemic, people stealing watches off people walking down the street. You've got the burglary at an all-time high. London, a lot of people are put off by it. And this is what he spent £6.3 million on.
This could have been a bit
to speak as to why.
He doesn't need to speak. People need to speak out and say, well, why didn't we know about this? But the idea, can I say something to you, Nana? The idea is right. It's like, for example, take the Northern Line. You know, there are 6 Northern Lines.
6 Northern Lines.
6 different Northern Lines, maybe more now, because one goes from Mill Hill East to Mill Hill.
This was the overground he was...
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 9:49. We're going to be talking a little bit about the fact that it's National Obesity Day, which sounds like a celebration, but it isn't actually a celebration.
It's just another stupid gimmick.
But first of all, with us still in the studio, Daily Mail columnist...
National Obesity Day, that's my day.
Don't you think it's a stupid gimmick?
Well, I don't know. We don't have National Thin Day.
No. Every day is National Obesity Day, let's face it.
In my house, every day is National Obesity Day.
And we're not allowed to call people fat anymore.
No, I think you are allowed to call people fat.
Are you?
Yes. No,
we'll probably be shamed for it's probably a hate crime to call somebody fat, so...
Well, you will get accused of fat shaming.
Yeah.
That's the thing, you're not allowed...
What are you supposed to
do? I say bring back shame. I want to start a campaign.
What is National Obesity Day? Is it for obese people to celebrate being obese? Is that what it is?
We're supposed to highlight the fact there is so much obesity in the country and do something about it.
Yes.
But I think these things are gimmicks like National...
Is it sponsored by Greggs?
Probably. Can we talk about burglaries, Sarah Vine? This
Yes.
is a horrendous statistic, isn't it? About the number of burglaries. I think in the last 3 years, there are some areas that have had 0 burglaries solved.
In England and Wales.
I just don't think they're a priority these days, are they?
They're supposed to be. Do you remember Mark Rowe,
yes.
the Met Commission, said every burglary will be
Car
investigated?
theft is also a problem. I mean, I don't know whether that's classified as burglary.
No, well, but these things really matter to people.
No, they don't.
Although the police have decided they don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because they're so busy worrying about sort of, knife crime and other things, but they don't have enough resources, or hate crime, exactly.
On computer screen.
I know. It's property is no longer something that is considered a sort of, I don't know, there's a sort of weird...
Isn't there?
Strange. If you've got nice stuff, it's sort of your fault if someone wants to steal it.
Correct.
I get that sense.
Which is a strangely left-leaning political atmosphere that we're living
Absolutely,
under the Conservatives. I think this will be actually one of those issues that people will vote on in the election because everybody's looking around for where to put their vote. And if you've got a personal story that is emotional, you are likely to vote for an alternative party because your burglary wasn't sold.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I mean, it's just not a priority, is it? That's the problem.
And people have to hassle the police to at least give them a burglary number because then they can claim on their insurance. I remember when I was burgled about 15 years ago, they took my front door down with a sledgehammer.
Did they?
Yeah, and they made a terrible mess. And it took, this was 15 years ago, 2 days to get the police to do anything about it.
Wow, with a sledgehammer?
Sledgehammer.
You weren't in the house, presumably?
No, mercifully, because might have taken it to me.
Yeah.
And because it was a big, strong
my
door.
daughter's at the University of Manchester, and her student cohort get burgled all the time.
How terrible.
I mean, constantly.
I
it's
did.
just a sort of thing.
I was at University of Manchester, same thing.
For some reason, I think because, students have laptops and stuff, and I think they're just a magnet for people wanting to nick stuff, and nothing ever gets done. And it's almost as though there's a sense that it's your fault for having your laptop in your house.
I got burgled one night, which was me and my mum and the children in the house, and it was 3 men and 2 women, and they came into the house, and I came down in the morning and the back door was open. I thought, oh, that's strange, back door's open. Didn't really question it. And then walked into where all my laundry is, and there was a space that my ex-husband used to use as a gym, and it was all just completely trashed. And they were in the house for an hour and a half.
And you didn't hear them?
The neighbour's CCTV caught them, and we didn't hear them. Nobody was ever arrested.
Yeah, but it's a horrible thought, isn't it, that somebody was in your house while you were asleep?
Definitely.
It was.
How vulnerable does that make you feel?
But do you know what it also made me feel? I thought, how lucky am I that 5 people were in my house for an hour and a half? My house is not enormous. I've made it sound like it's a country pile. It's not. And I didn't... And luckily, we were all fine and not harmed.
Let's just talk to you very briefly about the Prime Minister's speech where he talked about security for MPs, Sarah, because you were married to Michael Gove.
Yeah, I mean,
it
is...
People coming to your home was a serious problem.
People coming... Well, the man who killed David Amos was... Before he killed David Amos, he was trying to kill Michael. He didn't succeed, thank God. But he was tracked outside our house on repeated occasions, and the police, were actually quite sort of. They took it very seriously, I have to say. They were. But the problem is, it only takes one sort of nutter, as it were, to put someone in danger. Yeah. And we've now got a situation. I think the sort of hysteria on social media and the proliferation of crazy conspiracy theories, often put about by quite responsible people. You'd think, wow, people believe stuff that is not true, and they understandably get very wound up about it. And, as I said, it only takes one person who's not quite completely stable to,
We need to move on, unfortunately. Sorry? We've got to read this out. A Home Office spokesperson said since 2010, our communities are safer. Crimes, including burglary, robbery and theft, are down 48%. More police officers in England and Wales than ever before. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. A lot more.
Sorry.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. We've got some frost around this morning, some dense fog patches too, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. And then all eyes on the west as the next weather system moves in. This morning, though, plenty of sunshine across the UK away from the southwest. Cold start to the day. This weather front slowly pushing north and eastwards through the day, coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and then Northern Ireland for the afternoon. Some of the rain could be heavy at times. The wind's picking up here too, but elsewhere staying dry. Plenty of sunny spells, though the sunshine turning hazy across eastern England by the afternoon. And temperatures, well, double figures for the vast majority, feeling a little warmer than the weekend. Into this evening time, this band of rain continues to push north and eastwards across the country, though it starts to weaken. Slows down across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland here giving a grey night with outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. Further west, some clear spells, but blustery showers quickly following on behind. Temperatures staying above freezing for everyone with generally more cloud around. So a grey start across eastern areas on Tuesday morning, bright further west, but blustery showers quickly moving their way eastwards. But the east should start to brighten up as we move through the morning into the afternoon as that weather system moves out the way. A few showers starting to bubble up as the temperatures rise. And for most of us getting into double figures by the afternoon. See you again soon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Sadiq Khan, 6.3 million on a virtue signal, loading lines. Why is he spending the people's money in this way? And why is nobody saying anything? I want to hear from Suzanne Hall, the potential Conservative candidate, or Howard Cox, the potential Reform candidate who could potentially take this off Sadiq Khan. Why are they not speaking? This is ridiculous.
Well, it was sprung on everybody. Did you know about that?
I didn't know about it.
Nobody knows. So they're spending this money. They're spending £6.3 million, and no one knew about it. Where's the press? Where are the public consultations? No one knew. I think it's a good idea to rename the train lines, because all these train lines are there are like 4 of them, 6 of them, whatever, and they're all going all these different directions. And you tell someone to come, and you don't even know the name.
Yeah, but 6.3 million. Listen, if he wants to give me 6.3 million to come up with some virtue signalling lines, I'd like to know which advertising agency he employed to do this, how long it took him, and why he's even done it in the first place. Why has he done this?
He has done this. Look, with the virtue signalling, because he's part of Team World. He's Rishi Sunak. It's this whole concept is every inclusiveness. There is no country. Nobody's English. Our own history is bad. Not my history, but whatever. The English history is bad. And it's a denial of history. It's Orwellian or something. Yeah. Not that I know about.
I think it's an absolute absurdity that Sadiq Khan should be doing that. He's got a knife crime epidemic, a crime epidemic, people stealing watches off people walking down the street. You've got the burglary at an all-time high. London, a lot of people are put off by it. And this is what he spent £6.3 million on.
This could have been a bit
to speak as to why.
He doesn't need to speak. People need to speak out and say, well, why didn't we know about this? But the idea, can I say something to you, Nana? The idea is right. It's like, for example, take the Northern Line. You know, there were 6 Northern Lines.
6 Northern Lines.
6 different Northern Lines, maybe more now, because one goes from Mill Hill East to Mill Hill.
This was the overground he was...
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Yeah, so describe the contents of the letter for us, because it is quite strongly worded, isn't it? And it suggests that your property is empty. And what do they suggest it's going to be used for?
They say, as part of this process, Northamptonshire Council is identifying empty properties and sites within the area, with the aim of encouraging owners to bring premises back into use or to find alternative options for derelict sites. The resettlement team in Northamptonshire Council supports asylum seekers and refugees across 3 different projects: Homes for Ukraine, Afghan resettlement and asylum dispersal. At present, we are seeing a considerable increase in positive immigration decisions being made in favour of asylum seekers. So basically, they're wanting accommodation. But who goes around and assesses whether these properties are lived in or they are actually empty?
Clearly, Ted, no one had bothered to come and look at your house at all, had they?
What do you want now? Because clearly you are both very shaken by this letter, and that letter that you received in response has not gone far enough. Do you want an apology? What more do you want to see?
Well, she said here that she's you know, I sincerely apologise, this Lindsay Bellchambers, but I don't see, there was no explanation as to how they've come to say this property was empty, whether it was disused, whether it was unkempt, or what. If you go back through the history of the property, it's not been empty.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
We're always told that there is a huge need for care workers in Britain. We're always told that the salaries just aren't big enough against the benefit system for British people to want to do that work. And there probably is some real truth in that. And yet, if up to 25% of those that come are acting illegally, and it would seem, up until now, that in some areas, foreign care workers come in, but bring in almost the same number of family members with them, that we need to have a proper debate about this. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Padgham, chair of the Independent Care Group. If I accept those arguments for a moment, how can it be that the system is so lax that up to 25% are found by the Inspector of Borders and Immigration to be working illegally?
Well, good evening to you, Nigel. It was good to join you. I mean, those figures are shocking to me. When I looked at it today, when I saw that 275 visas had been issued to a care home that didn't even exist, and a further over 1,000 people joined a company that only had previously 4 staff in it, it makes me wonder the bureaucracy of the Home Office didn't think to check that these companies exist in the first place, because it should be quite straightforward. If people are providing care that are regulated by the Care Quality Commission, it's a simple phone call to check and double check. Sadly, there seems to have been very many loopholes at the beginning. I believe that's been tightened now, but I can't understand it, because all the providers that are doing it in the proper way have to go through quite a rigmarole to actually get approved, and it takes months. So it beggars belief that this has happened and people have been approved for a company that doesn't even exist.
And that would be great. Back again in 2010, 2016, we had under, I think, around 400,000 civil servants, and that saved a significant amount of money. The spending, the costs alone, I think, came down to something like £11 billion. This is where we have to be again, to be an agile government that's fit in the sense of financially sound money, conservative principles, but actually making sure the public keep more of their money.
The government's Rwanda bill returns to the House of Lords today, with a number of votes expected to be cast. Nearly 50 amendments have been put forward to peers. Among them, the government's assessment that Rwanda is a safe country to send asylum seekers to. It comes almost 2 years after ministers first announced the plan to send some migrants to the East African nation. The government has promised that first flights will happen in the spring. George Galloway is due to be sworn in as the new Rochdale MP in the House of Commons later today. The Workers' Party of Britain leader won last week's by-election by over 5,500 votes. The focus of his campaign was the ongoing war in Gaza, warning Sir Keir Starmer that his party would pay a high price for enabling and covering what he called the catastrophe. Galloway was a Labour MP for 16 years until his suspension from the party in 2003 after remarks made at the start of the Iraq War. Nikki Haley has defeated Donald Trump in the Republican primary in Washington, D.C. It's her first victory over the former president in this year's campaign to become the Republican presidential candidate. She lost in her home state of South Carolina, but she's now the first woman to win a Republican primary in U.S. history. The only remaining challenger to Donald Trump in the race, she won 62.9% of that vote. However, Mr. Trump has a significant lead over Ms. Haley, and he's likely to face Joe Biden in the November election. Education leaders are calling for a double-digit pay rise for all teachers across England. It's after the government said school salaries should return to a more reasonable level. The National Association of Head Teachers Union said England currently has the highest number of unfilled teaching posts in over a decade. It says a raise of at least 10% in all salaries will counter the recruitment and retention crisis. Pupils from low-income backgrounds in England are still behind in their maths grades compared with before the COVID pandemic. A new think tank report has revealed performance levels dropping back to 2017 levels for pupils in years 3 to 9. The research shows the disadvantage gap has widened from around 7 months to almost 9. That amounts to an average loss of over 4 months of learning in secondary schools and a loss of 2 months in primary schools. Maths teacher Bobby Siegel says the government needs to do more.
What the government has done in lockdown is they introduced the tutoring fund, spent a lot of money on this, and it was meant to help close the gap. And to be honest, that's an important scheme, and I think they're planning on ending that closing tutoring gap. The most disadvantaged pupils are suffering more. And if we want to make sure students have the basic numeracy skills so they can access, again, applying for jobs and understanding the basics of a payslip, they need those skills. And I think the report today is all about saying, actually, those disadvantaged pupils are falling even further behind.
And Cadbury's chocolate is turning 200 today, and it's celebrating by recreating its first shop using more than 600 bars of dairy milk chocolate. Cadbury's has recreated their first ever store out of chocolate to celebrate the company's anniversary. The edible masterpiece recreates the first shop John Cadbury opened at 93 Bull Street in Birmingham. At 85 centimetres tall, weighing 300 kilograms, the magnificent chocolate shop took the talented chocolatiers 5 days to make. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
There's a time. It is now 10:07. You're with Britain's Newsroom, GB News, Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
So the Workers' Party of Britain leader George Galloway has arrived in Parliament as this afternoon is expected to be sworn in at the House of Commons after winning last week's by-election in Rochdale. Let's just remind ourselves a bit of his victory speech.
Keir Starmer's problems just got 100 times more serious than they were before today. This is going to spark a movement, a landslide, a shifting of the tectonic plates in scores of parliamentary constituencies, beginning here in the northwest.
Well, he described Starmer and the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak charming. He said 2 cheeks of the same backside, saying they'd both been well and truly spanked. Well, joining us in the studio is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Humiliation for Keir Starmer.
Labour wasn't even standing in the election.
Well, whose fault's that?
Well, Labour screwed up, right? They certainly chose the wrong candidate and had to get rid of him. But to say this is the tectonic plates shifting is completely mad. So Labour didn't have a candidate, so he didn't beat anybody. The Conservative candidate went on holiday during the election. That's how seriously you lot took it. And then where were the Lib Dems? I mean, seriously, the Lib Dems could have had it. Now, this Rochdale is a blip. It's incredible. And let's not pretend that lots of Muslims who believe
Aren't you making that mistake, though, of complacency there? Because maybe he's onto something. Maybe this is going to happen all over the country. Look, in Wes Streeting, he's one of your most talented Labour front benchers. He's got a Muslim candidate standing against him in Ilford North. He's got a majority of 5,000. 27% of the constituency is Muslim. They're very unhappy. Labour's taken that vote for granted.
No. There are people who there certainly are Muslims who feel like that, but actually they don't support George Galloway. I mean, that's the difference, right? They did in Rochdale because there was very little choice, right? Let's not pretend that the Workers' Party of Great Britain supports Muslims. I mean, the Workers' Party of Great Britain and George Galloway have been all over the political shop, right? And the people we should feel sorry for are the people of Rochdale, because George Galloway certainly has no interest in supporting them, as we've seen in the other constituencies that he got thrown out of each one immediately as soon as there was an election because he doesn't do anything for it. I think frankly, the media is making too much of George Galloway. He is a self-publicising narcissist.
But they didn't vote for the British Workers' Party of Britain, whatever it's called. They voted for an unequivocal ceasefire in Gaza.
Yes.
And there are enough people in this country who feel sufficiently angry about that they will place their vote purely on that one issue. I think it's also worth reminding ourselves that the second place in Labour, in Rochdale, was not Labour or Conservative. It was an independent candidate, David Scully. He's a local businessman who stood... I mean, what this vote says, and I do think both parties, actually, Labour and Conservatives, are risking complacency, is to understand how dissatisfied the general public are with this idea of the uni party, that there's no distinction. To use George Galloway's phrase, two cheeks of the same backside.
Can we make it clear? There was no Labour candidate in Rochdale. So Labour lost Rochdale by choosing the wrong candidate, completely screwing up their...
Well, there was... Well, the whole point, isn't it, that there was a Labour candidate. He accused Benjamin Netanyahu of stepping down his security forces in the IDF, and therefore that led to the invasion.
Yeah, but so there wasn't... So he was disowned by Labour. So let's not pretend that there was a Labour candidate. And yes, I think we have to take dissatisfaction in the country very seriously. I don't think it's just among Muslims, frankly. I think there is dissatisfaction with the two main parties, because what they're feeling is, what have we got to offer?
Yeah.
And in times like that, I mean, let's talk about Paul Tully. I mean, then independents have won before because they actually talk about what is happening on the ground, and that's what's important. Is the thing about George Galloway is, he will only talk about Gaza.
He did tick the boxes, though, didn't he? He did talk about the threat to the local maternity unit, the local...
At the end, he didn't really... I mean...
But I think he got 40% of the vote. That is a pretty extraordinary result.
He got 12,000 votes,
40% of the votes cast.
Well, it was 40% people came out and voted, and he got 40% of the 40%.
I mean, what worries me about the upcoming election is the number of people who aren't going to vote. And I mean, in the general election. Yeah. And that is what really worries me. And that's what... Well, it's not apathy. It's... there's nobody to vote for.
And why is your man, Starmer, when you consider the Tories been in power for 14 years, why hasn't he cut through? Because that's what you're saying. If you're saying people are dissatisfied with both main parties, it's down to the leader to make people feel...
Well, if we're talking...
If you think about Blair in 97, after 18 years Tories, people would long for him. There was a passion for Blair out there.
Well, not for you.
No.
I mean, you were there dissing him all the time, accusing him of lying.
I was right to.
But no, I mean, actually.
Why hasn't Starmer done it?
He's 20% ahead in the polls. I mean, what more can you do, right? He has got people who want to vote for him. He has got a lot of people who, I mean, as I said, over and over again, Labour didn't stand in Rochdale, so we really can't do it. And
but they would only have won if they stood on the ticket of an unequivocal ceasefire in Gaza.
No, we don't know that. Labour has been overturning massive Conservative majorities in by-elections, right? We have no idea what would have happened had... You know, we had the right guy in Gaza, in Rochdale.
I think Galloway would still have won.
I do. Well, yes, but you don't know.
No, you don't.
You have no idea because they've been... And, you know, where was the Tory? Why did he go on holiday?
The Tories are never going to win in Rochdale. They haven't won in Rochdale ever.
You don't go on holiday.
No, but there is...
You do try and offer an alternative. I mean, that's what was so terrible, was that neither Labour nor the Tories offered an alternative to George Galloway.
But there is this great disenchantment with the main political parties, I think, on both sides. People feel disembodied, disenchanted, they feel disconnected, they don't know who to vote for. That's why Reform is stepping into the vacuum, you could argue.
And look at Reform. I mean, maybe you don't put up somebody who's been thrown out of the Labour Party for sexting a 17-year-old, right? I mean, you know,
that's who the candidate was.
One does absolutely. That's who the candidate does, and one does wonder whether Reform will just have anybody as they talk.
We've got Ben Habib in the studio in this programme.
3 former Labour MPs all on the ballot paper.
I know.
Has there ever been a situation like that before?
2 of which were thrown out of the party.
Yeah.
And the third has been suspended while he's... I mean, of course...
Well, he should be thrown out, shouldn't he, for what he said?
Well, they've got to... You have to have a fair process, Andrew. You don't just have Andrew saying he should be out.
And it wasn't just vile anti-conspiracy theories, it was horrible anti-Semitism.
Can we ask you about Labour's plans? We're going to hear them this morning announced, Scarlett, during the show, about what to do about these NEETs, which is people who are not in employment, education or training. A record number of 16 to 24-year-olds just sat at home basically flicking through their phones.
Well, 861,000 of them.
Incredibly depressed. I mean, it is a really, really depressing statistic. I mean, I really do believe that work is good for the soul, right?
Absolutely.
And, I mean, and it's very easy, you know, when all of us are doing this for work. But actually, I mean, I've seen it over and over again, and with my children, is how... I mean, my daughter worked in pubs, but trying to find other jobs because actually she didn't want to sit at home. So I think that I think it's really important that we take these young people who must be pretty disillusioned, who did badly at school, so for them the education system has failed them, and that we actually try and look at what is their potential, how they can retrain in things. I think it's really, really important because actually they don't want to be living on benefits.
And it's a lockdown hangover. This is that generation who didn't get to sit their GCSEs, maybe didn't get to sit their A-levels. Some of them went to university and spent 2 years at university, sat at Zoom in their parents' house doing everything they should have done for university.
I know, I mean, my next-door neighbour was one of them.
It's a horrible, miserable situation for this generation. I'm glad that somebody's talking about how to help them.
Yeah, I mean, and it is about saying, you know, actually... There is a second... We do believe in second chances.
Yeah.
And, OK, you screwed up your GCSEs. I mean, most of these people are not actually have been to university. Most of these are kids who blew their GCSEs for one reason or another, who couldn't do English, who couldn't do maths. And actually, we have to give them a second chance because they need that, but we need them. I mean, Britain should not be a country where you have young people sitting at home just waiting.
It's nearly 1 million. It's a terrible figure, isn't it?
It's a terrible figure. It's a really, really terrible figure. And I'm really pleased that Liz Kendall is the Labour person, is actually doing something about doing... And it's not about...
But what is she going to do?
So what's she going to do? So she's going to try and get a decent careers service in schools, because that's one of the things that happen is you don't get a careers service, right? So where do the kids go? It's fine if you've got parents who are saying, "Oh, I know somebody who can do this," but actually, if you haven't, I mean, you can't.
So that's it, is it?
No, mental health. But partly there's mental health problems. So mental health hubs in schools, which do happen, and I know because I'm on the board of a young people's mental health thing in Haringey called Open Door. We have counsellors in schools that actually deal with the problems before they leave school, right? So that you find out, because there are kids, and partly because of COVID, I mean, you're right, the lockdown, who are just not going to school anymore. Well, they're never going to get anything.
Yeah.
No.
And also, you know what they do need? I hope she mentions this, but she won't, I'm sure. They need to work out how to get off their tech addiction. There's a whole generation of young people who are addicted, and I don't use that word lightly.
To the phone?
To their phones and to the dopamine hits, the constant dopamine hits of TikTok and everything else. And they lose hours, and suddenly they look up and then they've lost 3 hours of their day. There won't be a parent or grandparent watching this who isn't nodding vigorously at
and
the screen
I know
now.
people in really good jobs for whom, I mean, I went on holiday with a guy who is really, I mean, he's quite well known. He's very, very intellectual. He could not spend a meal without either on his phone or on his Nintendo.
What?
Yeah,
It's rife.
How old was he?
30.
Honestly, it's a pandemic of tech addiction.
It's not just kids
you're right.
who are at home, right?
Should be banned at mealtime.
Yeah.
Banned at mealtime, phones.
Yeah, well, my son did tell me off for not. There is a problem.
No.
I banned it in my house.
I did. Then the next family that came, I said no phones.
Scarlett,
right.
Good to see you, as always. Now, don't forget, you can join Nigel Farage and Michelle Dewberry for a budget special in Whitehaven. I am going to be there as well. What day is it today, Andrew Pearce? It's Monday. I'm in the studio tomorrow. I will be there on Wednesday. You'll be here in the studio.
No, I'm going to be in the Westminster studio.
Oh, you're in the Westminster studio. Brilliant. So we've got fantastic coverage this week of the budget. Scan the QR code on the screen now, and you could join Michelle and/or Nigel to be part of the show in Whitehaven on Wednesday. Get your questions to them via that code. Right, still to come. Queen Camilla. She's exhausted, apparently. It must be... She needs a rest. She's taken centre stage since the King's cancer diagnosis. She's now going to be taking a break. Do you think she's overworked?
And we'll tell you after the break how many engagements she's carried out since January the 1st. You may be surprised.
Yeah, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Yeah, so describe the contents of the letter for us, because it is quite strongly worded, isn't it? And it suggests that your property is empty. And what do they suggest it's going to be used for?
They say, as part of this process, Northamptonshire Council is identifying empty properties and sites within the area, with the aim of encouraging owners to bring premises back into use or to find alternative options for derelict sites. The resettlement team in Northamptonshire Council supports asylum seekers and refugees across 3 different projects: Homes for Ukraine, Afghan resettlement and asylum dispersal. At present, we are seeing a considerable increase in positive immigration decisions being made in favour of asylum seekers. So basically, they're wanting accommodation. But who goes around and assesses whether these properties are lived in or they are actually empty?
Clearly, Ted, no one had bothered to come and look at your house at all, had they?
What do you want now? Because clearly you are both very shaken by this letter, and that letter that you received in response has not gone far enough. Do you want an apology? What more do you want to see?
Well, she said here that she's, you know, I sincerely apologise, this Lindsay Bellchambers, but I don't see, there was no explanation as to how they've come to say this property was empty, whether it was disused, whether it was unkempt, or what. If you go back through the history of the property, it's not been empty.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:23. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
We're joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Lars and writer and columnist Emma Wolfe in the studio. Let's talk to you first, Matthew.
Good morning.
We've got to ask you about the humiliation for Labour in Rochdale.
Yeah.
Didn't go well, did it?
No, it didn't go well. I mean, to put it mildly, like a lot of Labour people, I'm very upset that we let the people of Rochdale down. Rochdale deserves a lot better than it got on Thursday. It deserves a lot better than the MP who won on Thursday by a message of divisiveness. But he did win, and all I can say is...
And he won big.
And he won big because he won 37% of the vote. He won big because it was a complete mess. 2 things. The Tories got 31% of the vote in Rochdale in 2019. Ordinarily we wouldn't be expecting them to win, but you would have thought that, in the absence of a Labour candidate with Mr Galloway there, that moderate voters would rally around them, and they didn't.
I think the Tories wanted Galloway.
I think they did too, so they didn't do anything. The guy went out there, the candidate went on holiday in the middle of the campaign. But look, we needed the big the thing on Labour is it's incumbent on Labour to get a good candidate in Rochdale to beat him next time, and I think he will be beaten. But it was
just... He'll stand in Rochdale?
I'm very sceptical he won't. No, on the by-election special on this on Thursday, I said that, I think he might well flee to Bethnal Green, where his old stock, where he won before.
He doesn't want to live in Rochdale. He doesn't want to spend a lot of his week in Rochdale.
And also, in an ordinary campaign, because Rochdale has a large Muslim community, but it's not a majority Muslim community, I don't think that with ordinary circumstances he'd win.
There's an Muslim already standing in Bethnal Green where he stood.
That is the...
He was Shamima Begum's lawyer.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, there was more... But all I'd say is the fantastic Mr Tully, who's my hero.
Yes.
He's the independent. The guy, he came second. He runs the local football club. He does, the kids' football club and stuff. And he didn't even know that you're allowed a free post, that if you're a candidate, the Royal Mail deliver a letter. So I reckon another week... Yeah. And he might have given Mr Galloway... Can you imagine that? Mr Tully comes to Westminster. What a great film that would make.
Can you believe, Emma, that this election was fought on Gaza, 2,200 miles away?
I am over 2,000 miles away. I am terribly sad that UK politics... I care about the Israel-Gaza conflict. Let me just make that clear. Of course I do. My heart breaks for all of that humanitarian suffering. But I'm really sad that UK politics has been hijacked by Galloway standing up and saying, this is for Gaza. And you know what's more interesting? Watching that statement from Rishi Sunak on Friday afternoon, I was really moved. I thought, finally, he's saying something. He's going to do something. And you know what? By Saturday, I realised, A, it's just words, it's no action, nothing's going to happen. But it made me realise how much we need a leader in this country, how we are crying out for our Prime Minister or Starmer or anyone to take control, to look after this country. There are so many people who, like me, care about Gaza, who care about Israel, but who are desperately worried about their maternity. Like Tully, who was talking about issues that matter to
because you can't be born in Rochdale.
And I'm not saying the Muslim voters don't matter there, they do. But we are in Britain. And Gaza is over 2,000 miles away, and we need to focus on this country as well.
But doesn't it show you, though,
what's going to happen at the next election?
An organised...
It's frightening.
Galvanised, angry Muslim population.
They are very organised, Bev. They are extremely well organised. They are good at mobilising. Imams are incredibly good at mobilising the vote. It's frightening.
Message goes out in the mosque.
Absolutely, and postal votes went up very substantially from 15,000 to 23,000. Yeah. Absolutely. I think Labour has an issue in the small number of seats where there's a Muslim majority community. I think it's a very serious, it's a sort of overwhelming issue.
Well, Galloway's talking about putting up 60 candidates.
Yeah, and I think, and look, and all Galloway will benefit is the Tories. But a poll has just broken in the last couple of minutes, which is the worst, which is for the Standard, Ipsos Mori poll, which has Labour on 47, pretty steady, but the Tories have slipped from 27 to 20%.
They are plummeting.
Which is the worst poll for the Tories since Jim Callaghan was Prime Minister in 1978.
Is that in London?
No, that's national.
A national poll.
A national poll down to 20%.
I know we've said this before, but I have to ask off the back of that news, is it time to change the leader?
For which party? What now?
Is it time to change
No, but
the
people
leader?
are talking about a May election. He can't. Who?
Suella Braverman? There was a piece in the papers yesterday saying she's the only person that might be able to switch the dial.
The thing is, changing a leader, having that leadership election just causes... We're into March already. They need to steady the ship and work out.
Wait until January next year. If they waited until January next year, got Sunak out...
Braverman, again, will be so divisive in other ways. I cannot imagine that. Well, you know what? Nothing is going to shift the polls for the Conservatives right now.
People have made their mind up.
But I think that the prospects of a May election are receding this morning as Downing Street sees a poll on 20%. And interestingly, it's Reform have sort of stayed steady on 8 in this particular poll, so it's not like it's a few percent has gone to Labour and the Lib Dems.
Isn't it interesting how little this Wednesday budget really matters? Because we all know that they're scrabbling here, they're looking behind the backs of sofas, trying to give you 1p there, take it off you in another way. No one is going to change their mind right now.
They'll cut national insurance, in my view, because that's cheaper to cut national insurance
and it's a headline.
Because you have to give it to pensioners. But people will be... A lot of people will, at the same time, be dragged into a higher tax bracket.
Of course they will.
Because they've frozen the threshold.
Should we talk about...
It's dishonest.
Should we talk about diversity and inclusion in Florida, or should we talk about Queen Camilla taking time off because she's very tired?
Camilla.
Do you prefer? Let's talk about Camilla.
How many engagements she's performed this year?
46.
Good try.
13 since Charles announced his cancer diagnosis last month, but I think it's in the 40s already, isn't it?
But
do we know the answer?
No, I think it's 13 altogether.
OK.
Yeah. 13 altogether.
Now, are we getting out the world's smallest violin, Emma?
I know, I do go back and forth. Is it hard work?
Indian spa? No, it is not hard work.
I know, but she's in her 70s. It's quite wearing doing those kind of
Princess
public...
Anne is in her 70s and she's done 86 engagements.
I know. I'm just saying I think Camilla's been through quite a lot, I think, emotionally. I'm not saying she's, out there stacking shelves. There are people in their 70s still working, working as carers, whatever. I think it's quite emotionally wearing what she's been through. Becoming Queen, then all the family stuff, her husband being diagnosed as really possibly quite ill. I'm hearing that he's actually iller than we...
Wouldn't you want to stick around your husband while he's going through cancer treatment?
And is she definitely leaving Charles at home?
Yeah,
apparently she's going to India to a spa.
That's what surprised me. I thought when I first heard that she was taking a bit of time off, that she would be spending time with Charles at one of the beautiful country houses. They'd take your pick, where you want to go east or west. But actually, going to an Indian spa seems a bit weird. I'm a massive Camilla fan, actually.
She's been there quite a few times.
But we don't know, of course, how run down she's feeling. Maybe she's got, if not health problems, she may be not in a great way. But they're dropping like flies.
What baffles me, though, Emma,
she was the last.
When you're a working woman, which she is, that's not the tiring bit. The tiring bit is going home and running around with the Hoover and putting the dishwasher on and putting the laundry on and making the fridge full. She doesn't have to do anything.
You're going to be a red Republican like me and my nan, Red Jessie, soon. Who taught me that we should turn Buckingham Palace into council houses.
Funnily enough, I've got a renewed appreciation for the royal family, just mainly because I don't want President Tony Blair in the country. But I think they really run the risk of having a bit of a PR disaster.
I know, and I do agree with you.
She's tired.
I do agree with you, because it's not hard work when you have so much help. Everything is absolutely top-notch. Even the treatment. I mean, and absolutely, I wish King Charles all the best. But he's going to get... my father went through cancer. We've all seen our relatives go through cancer, getting the bus to the hospital, having their chemo, coming back on the bus, feeling rotten, having
He didn't go on a waiting list. I'm not saying he should, but I think the royal family needs to be aware that when you've got NHS waiting lists over 7.5 million, including for things like cancer treatment, that you have to be aware of how it plays with the public, how the messaging plays.
Well, talking of waiting, we've got to go to Tatiana Sanchez, who is waiting very patiently for us. Here's the headlines with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you very much. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor's under growing pressure to lower taxes, with the former Home Secretary Priti Patel saying voters need their money back. Income tax has reached an historic high, and whilst promising some cuts, Jeremy Hunt has been trying to temper expectations ahead of Wednesday's budget. Today, he's announced £360 million worth of funding for UK manufacturing to help boost the economy. Dame Priti told GB News the government can't keep on borrowing and it needs to be more cautious when it comes to spending.
We have over 500,000 civil servants. Now, even to shave a degree off that would cut public expenditure by at least £1 billion, and that would be great. Back again in 2010, 2016, we had around 400,000 civil servants, and that saved a significant amount of money. The spending, the costs alone, I think, came down to something like £11 billion. This is where we have to be again, to be an agile government that's fit in the sense of financially sound money, conservative principles, but actually making sure the public keep more of their money.
George Galloway is due to be sworn in as the new Rochdale MP later today. This is what he had to say en route to the Commons.
Well, I'll tell you once I've been inside. I always loved the building, the people in it, not quite so much.
The Workers' Party of Britain leader won last week's by-election by over 5,500 votes. The focus of his campaign was the ongoing war in Gaza, warning Sir Keir Starmer that his party would pay a high price for enabling and covering what he called the catastrophe. Galloway was a Labour MP for 16 years until his suspension from the party in 2003 after remarks he made at the start of the Iraq War. Nikki Haley has defeated Donald Trump in the Republican primary in Washington, D.C. This is her first victory over the former president in this year's campaign to become the Republican presidential candidate. She lost in her home state of South Carolina, but she's now the first woman to win a Republican primary in U.S. history. The only remaining challenger to Donald Trump in the race, she won almost 63% of the vote. And pupils from low-income backgrounds in England are still behind in their maths grades compared with before the COVID pandemic. A new think tank report has revealed performance levels dropping back to 2017 levels for pupils in years 3 to 9. The research shows the disadvantage gap has widened from around 7 months to almost 9. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2676 and €1.1683. The price of gold is £1,644 and 36 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,656 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
We're going to be hearing any moment from the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall. We're going to hear Labour's plans to get the youth out of bed and back to work. But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we're looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
Today we're in the heart of Shropshire at SDE Technology. I'm actually with the CCO of the company, Chris Greeno. Chris, I know you've got a lot of successful UK manufacturing news coming out of this building.
Absolutely, we are continuing to invest. We've got big investment plans this year. We've got a 100-tonne, 200-tonne progression press and a 1,000-tonne progression press coming online this year. We're looking at reshoring, so we're getting more and more inquiries, and it's good news.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I know you do a lot of exporting as well, don't you? Maybe not directly export, but your parts get bolted onto aeroplanes, to military vehicles, to automotive vehicles, and obviously get exported all around the world.
Absolutely, and we also export directly to America and Germany. So we're seeing more and more inquiries coming now for UK manufacturers, and certainly UK manufacturers making for the UK market, but also exporting. So it's great news for the UK economy.
Yeah, when you look at UK manufacturing, it's highly respected around the world, so why shouldn't we export?
Absolutely. UK manufactured product is quality product by quality companies, and we should be exporting around the world. We should be looked to for supplying that quality product.
Okay, skills gap, I know you've got some quite exciting ways of bridging that skill gap here at SDE.
Absolutely. So we don't just train our own, we've also got a training centre here where we train for other companies. So we're very much looking at bringing on apprenticeships. We're looking at training our own, so upskilling, and then bringing on apprenticeships to fill the gaps lower down. But there's exciting times here. Most of our staff have been with us a long time. I've been here for nearly 29 years, and we're looking to the future for UK manufacturing.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Well, to cut a very long story short, I was the chaplain in a school, and a pupil asked me to preach on how come they were told they had to accept the LGBT stuff in a Christian school. I thought that was a fair question. So I said, ultimately, no, you don't have to accept anybody else's ideas. You make up your own minds. And so on topics like the marriage being between a man and a woman, biological sex being real, gender identity not making perfect sense, therefore can't be entirely true. I said, you may adopt the church's position on that and respect the people you disagree with, but you make up your own mind. For which, as you say, I was reported to Prevent, the anti-terror watchdog, secular safeguarding authorities, the Teaching Regulation Agency, Disclosure and Barring Service, all of whom eventually cleared me, but I lost my job at the school, and that's why there's legal action ongoing.
It's an incredibly powerful sermon, to be fair. What do you make of Justin Welby in his current role? I've obviously rattled off quite a few things there. I mean, you've had personal experience of feeling quite abandoned. What's your view on his position?
Well, he's doing a very difficult job, in fairness to him. My personal view is perhaps he's not doing the best job of it. I'll be diplomatic about it. In a sense, I'm on the wrong side of things as far as he's concerned, I guess. Not a word of support, not a whisper from anyone in the Church of England's hierarchy for someone simply saying, you may accept the Church of England's own teaching. And I can't quite see how he can square that in his own head, but he would have to answer to that himself, I guess.
I mean, the irony is that, though this is obviously through no fault of your own, the Church of England has recently baptised people who have gone on to not just be referred to prevent, but actually commit acts of terrorism. Meanwhile, you were referred to prevent for essentially teaching.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew and Bev.
So Labour are announcing their plan to support young people back to work and training. So we're going to hear now from the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall.
As an MP and before I became an MP, and I really look forward to working with you on this subject in the months and years ahead. Now, this week, the Tories' 7th Chancellor gives his second budget, the last before the general election. Speculation swirls about what Jeremy Hunt will say and whether it will appease his divided, chaotic party. But whatever Mr. Hunt announces, it won't make up for 14 years of economic failure under this Conservative government. They claim the economy has turned a corner, but they've driven it into a dead end. Rishi's recession, with GDP per capita down in every quarter of the last year. Our economy smaller now than when the Prime Minister first entered Downing Street. The biggest hit to living standards on record, the highest tax burden for 70 years, more food banks than police stations, and our public services on their knees. People in this country don't need statistics to tell them the dire state we are in, or that they're paying more but getting less. And as Rachel Reeves, Labour's Shadow Chancellor, has said, we know what's led us here. Austerity choking off investment, Brexit without a plan, a disastrous mini-budget that sent interest rates soaring and mortgages rocketing, with ordinary people paying the price for an ideological gamble which swathes of Tory MPs still believe in. But there's another reason why the Tories have failed on the economy, and that's because they have failed on work. The official unemployment rate is low, but this isn't because there's a record high in the number of people actually in work. Indeed, Britain is the only country in the G7 whose employment rate hasn't returned to pre-pandemic levels. The reality is, increasing numbers of people are leaving the labour market and no longer even looking for work. This Parliament has seen the highest increase in economic inactivity for 40 years. And the number of people out of work because of long-term sickness is at an all-time high. 2.8 million people not in work because of poor health. The over 50s, mostly women, struggling with bad hips, knees and joints, often caring for elderly parents at the same time. Young people with mental health problems, many lacking basic qualifications. With all these problems, far worse in northern towns and cities, places the Tories promised to level up, but which have once again borne the brunt of their economic failure. In places like...
So that's the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall, who completely lost the room, in my view, by immediately launching into an attack on the Tories. She's still banging on about the Tories 2 or 3 minutes into her speech, and what we wanted to hear from her is what she and a Labour government will do to get kids between 16 and 24 into work or into education. They're called NEETs, not in employment, not in training, not in education.
So disappointing, Liz Kendall.
Yeah.
I am that mother with teenagers. You need to talk to me and tell me what you're going to do. Don't start and give us, what, 3-4 minutes? Well, how have we got to this place? Because the Conservatives, because if you think you're going to win the next election, own it. Yeah. Act like you already have and stop slagging off the Tories.
We just heard from Matthew Larser, who's a former Labour advisor, that the latest poll's given the Labour a 27-point lead. So why do they do this? They should be grown up. They're in opposition. They're months away from being the next government. So start talking about what you're going to do in government, not more political point scoring. It just turns people off.
Pathetic. If you think you're going to win the next election, own it. Act like you have. Tell us exactly what you're going to do. Don't stand there criticising the Conservative government. You don't need to do that. People are already making up their own minds. Tell us what the alternative is. Right, well, she might have lost the room, but have the Tories lost the countryside? Recently, Rishi Sunak addressed the National Farmers Union conference and he told them, I have your back, while sharing stories of how he once milked a cow. But now farmers are saying that that hasn't made up for the years of unpopular post-Brexit trade deals and a bungled transition from EU farming payments.
So joining us now is Windsor and Maidenhead farmer and landowner Colin Rayner. Colin, morning to you. Have the Tories traditionally... are seen as the custodians of the countryside? They get the rural vote. Have they lost it this time?
I think they just made them, the members of the countryside, very, very unhappy. And I'm a true long-life Conservative voter. And we are now looking over the border in Wales and see what the Labour Party have done to the Welsh farmers and countryside, actually calling them right-wing fascists, I believe one of them did. But my view is that the Conservatives have upset the countryside, have upset the farmers. They need to do some hard work to win back their votes. But my fear is that the Conservative members, farmers in the countryside will vote, just won't vote. So there's a lot of work to do.
What have they done? Colin, explain why you've lost faith in them. What have they done to the countryside that, in your view, was mistaken?
Well, they've just made error after error. They've upset us all about the how they've dealt with Brexit, the trade deals, the mountain paperwork that we get. Each year they give us more legislation. They just make it very, very hard for us to farm and to work. We've got this net zero. We are criticised every day for polluting the countryside and being horrible. The farmers never built Heathrow Airport or London, but we are blamed for all the pollution all the time. And we're just fed up. We've been attacked by this government and every political party. We're now being told we must grow wildflowers instead of food. It just frightens me.
Colin, where do you think politicians think the food is going to come from when all the farmers have closed down? Because that is inevitably where this will end, and we've just seen some clips of the campaign "No Farmers, No Food." Are politicians not thinking with their imagination?
But the biggest problem, this is happening throughout Europe. Every farming country in Europe are on protesting. They're all going down this net zero, accusing us of polluting the countryside, want us to grow wildflowers and look after the countryside. We've been looking after the countryside since 1551. We've not destroyed the environment. We've just been good at doing what we're doing, and it upsets us.
It upsets all of us. I'm sorry we've got very little time with you this morning, Colin, but good to talk to you. Stay with us on GB News. I do wonder where the food is going to come from. Maybe, well, it's National Obesity Day. Maybe that's the whole point. We're going to be starved. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners. And Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of oestrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences that I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
So lots of you getting in touch about Queen Camilla because she's taking a week off. She's going to a spa in India because she's exhausted. Of course, she's under a strain because of the cancer treatment of her husband. Sharon says, you cannot judge how a woman of 76 feels when you're only 45. Well,
She's
about
talking
you,
to
not
you.
me. I'm a bit older than
We wish both of us were 45.
It's not the hour or so when you're shaking hand that matters, it's the preparation, the travel, the early starts, late finishes. Put all that together, make some effort and empathy. At 76, even if you're healthy, it's tiring. You don't have the energy of someone 30 years younger or the same recovery time. I'm only late 60s and can walk for miles, but need at least one full day to recover before I can get up and do it all again.
A lot of you agreeing with Sharon. You're very cross with me for saying that Camilla should basically just get on with the job while so many other royals are out of work, as it were. Tony says, when I was at work, I had to attend many dinners and social occasions. Believe me, it was hard work. The Queen has no choice. Give it a go, Bev. You'd soon change your tune. I'm not saying it's easy. I can't think of anything worse than having to get up, put your makeup on every day, put a frock on. Oh, I have to do that anyway.
You do.
And then talk to boring people that you don't really particularly know or want to meet. I have to do that as well every day. No, I'm joking.
You're not.
But what my point is this, right? The thing that tires you out in life, as I said, it's not just the work, is it? It's all the other stuff that women predominantly do as well. The hoovering, the dishwasher, the laundry. She's not doing any of that.
She doesn't have to plan the weekly food bill.
She doesn't have to get on the tube and wait for the bus.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I just can't feel that sorry.
Clive says, give Camilla a break regardless of all the help she has. Travelling alone is tiring as you get older. She may well have arthritic problems, which makes it more difficult, or she may have other age-related problems which hinder her. Stop being so critical.
But you know what? Also, I think if I was 76... you know, the idea of getting on a plane to India, I'd find the travelling in itself is quite tiring. Minded, she'll be going first class.
And she doesn't like flying at all. But the palace have revealed this just in the last day that the King is going to go to Australia later this year, which suggests to me then that they are expecting a confident outcome of his cancer treatment, and Queen Camilla will go with him.
And talking about burglaries as well, Linda has said, my house got burgled last year while I was asleep in bed. I got a crime number. I also got my car stolen, didn't get a crime number for days. The police failed to tell me they'd found the car. They put it in the pound rather than tell me, and I received a letter from the pound 4 days later. That sort of lack of communication, I think, when you're dealing with the police is incredibly frustrating. And, yeah, as I say, lots of you saying, give Camilla a break.
Yeah.
She needs a holiday.
Well, that's exactly what she's having, a break.
You're very kind out there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right, keep your emails coming, gbviews@gbnews.com.
And, of course, we're talking to Reforms UK's Ben Habib later. I wonder what he will say about Reform's woeful performance in the Rochdale by-election last week. It was woeful. This is Britain's Newsroom, GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. We've got some frost around this morning, some dense fog patches too, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. And then all eyes on the west as the next weather system moves in. This morning, though, plenty of sunshine across the UK away from the southwest. Cold start to the day. This weather front slowly pushing north and eastwards through the day, coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and then Northern Ireland for the afternoon. Some of the rain could be heavy at times. The wind's picking up here too, but elsewhere staying dry. Plenty of sunny spells, though the sunshine turning hazy across eastern England by the afternoon. And temperatures, well, double figures for the vast majority, feeling a little warmer than the weekend. Into this evening time, this band of rain continues to push north and eastwards across the country, though it starts to weaken. Slows down across eastern parts of England, eastern Scotland here giving a grey night with outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. Further west, some clear spells, but blustery showers quickly following on behind. Temperatures staying above freezing for everyone with generally more cloud around. So a grey start across eastern areas on Tuesday morning, bright further west, but blustery showers quickly moving their way eastwards. But the east should start to brighten up as we move through the morning into the afternoon as that weather system moves out the way. A few showers starting to bubble up as the temperatures rise. And for most of us getting into double figures by the afternoon. See you again soon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Sadiq Khan, 6.3 million on a virtue signal, load of lines. Why is he spending the people's money in this way? And why is nobody saying anything? I want to hear from Suzanne Hall, the potential Conservative candidate, or Howard Cox, the potential Reform candidate who could potentially take this off Sadiq Khan. Why are they not speaking? This is ridiculous.
Well, it was sprung on everybody. Did you know about that?
I didn't know about it.
Nobody knows. So they're spending this money. They're spending £6.3 million, and no one knew about it. Where's the press? Where are the public consultations? No one knew. I think it's a good idea to rename the train lines, because all these train lines are there are like 4 of them, 6 of them, whatever, and they're all going all these different directions. And you tell someone to come, and you don't even know the name.
Yeah, but 6.3 million. Listen, if he wants to give me 6.3 million to come up with some virtue signalling lines, I'd like to know which advertising agency he employed to do this, how long it took him, and why he's even done it in the first place. Why has he done this?
He has done this with the virtue signalling because he's part of Team World. He's Rishi Sunak. It's this whole concept is every inclusiveness. There is no country. Nobody's English. Our own history is bad. Not my history, but whatever. The English history is bad. And it's a denial of history. It's Orwellian or something.
Yeah.
Not that I know
I
about
think it's an absolute absurdity that Sadiq Khan should be doing that. He's got a knife crime epidemic, a crime epidemic, people stealing watches off people walking down the street.
Yes.
You've got the burglary at an all-time high. London, a lot of people are put off by it. And this is what he spent £6.3 million on.
This could have been a bit
to speak as to why.
But he doesn't need to speak. People need to speak out and say, well, why didn't we know about this? But the idea, can I say something to you, Nana? The idea is right. It's like, for example, take the Northern Line. You know, there were 6 Northern Lines.
6 Northern Lines.
6 different Northern Lines, maybe more now, because one goes from Mill Hill East to Mill Hill.
But this was the overground he was...
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Yeah, so describe the contents of the letter for us, because it is quite strongly worded, isn't it? And it suggests that your property is empty. And what do they suggest it's going to be used for?
They say, as part of this process, Northamptonshire Council is identifying empty properties and sites within the area, with the aim of encouraging owners to bring premises back into use or to find alternative options for derelict sites. The resettlement team in Northamptonshire Council supports asylum seekers and refugees across 3 different projects: Homes for Ukraine, Afghan resettlement and asylum dispersal. At present, we are seeing a considerable increase in positive immigration decisions being made in favour of asylum seekers. So basically, they're wanting accommodation. But who goes around and assesses whether these properties are lived in or they are actually empty?
Clearly, Ted, no one had bothered to come and look at your house at all, had they?
What do you want now? Because clearly you are both very shaken by this letter, and that letter that you received in response has not gone far enough. Do you want an apology? What more do you want to see?
Well, she said here that she's, you know, I sincerely apologise, this Lindsay Bellchambers, but I don't see, there was no explanation as to how they've come to say this property was empty, whether it was disused, whether it was unkempt, or what. If you go back through the history of the property, it's not been empty.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And that would be great. Back again in 2010, 2016, we had under, I think, around 400,000 civil servants, and that saved a significant amount of money. The spending, the costs alone, I think, came down to something like £11 billion. This is where we have to be again, to be an agile government that's fit in the sense of financially sound money, conservative principles, but actually making sure the public keep more of their money.
George Galloway is due to be sworn in as the new Rochdale MP later. Arriving at the Commons, he was asked how he feels about his comeback.
Well, I'll tell you once I've been inside. I always loved the building. The people in it, not quite so much.
The Workers' Party of Britain leader won last week's by-election by more than 5,500 votes. The focus of his campaign was the ongoing war in Gaza, warning Sir Keir Starmer that Labour would pay a high price for enabling what he says is a catastrophe. Mr Galloway was a Labour MP for 16 years. He was suspended from the party in 2003 over remarks he made at the start of the Iraq War. The Rwanda bill returns to the House of Lords this afternoon as the legislation enters its final stages in Parliament. Nearly 50 amendments have been put forward, with a number of votes expected today and on Wednesday. Among them, the government's assessment that Rwanda is a safe country for asylum seekers. It comes almost 2 years after ministers first announced the plan to send some migrants to the East African country. The government has promised that the first flights will happen in the spring. Meanwhile, GB News understands around 150 migrants have been intercepted crossing the English Channel in 3 small boats today. That's after 327 made the crossing yesterday, the same day that a 7-year-old girl died after a boat capsized. She'd been travelling with her pregnant mother, her father and 3 siblings when the boat got into difficulty in the early hours of yesterday morning. Nikki Haley has defeated Donald Trump in the Republican primary in Washington, D.C. This is her first victory over the former president in this year's campaign to become the Republican presidential candidate. She lost in her home state of Carolina, but she's now the first woman to win a Republican primary in U.S. history. The only remaining challenger to Donald Trump in the race, she won almost 63% of that vote. However, Mr. Trump has a significant lead over Ms. Haley and is likely to face Joe Biden in the November election. Education leaders are calling for a double-digit pay rise for all teachers across England. It's after the government said school salaries should return to a more reasonable level. The National Association of Head Teachers Union said England currently has the highest number of unfilled teaching posts in over a decade. It says a raise of at least 10% will counter the recruitment and retention crisis. Pupils from low-income backgrounds in England are still behind in their maths grades compared with before the COVID pandemic. A new think tank report has revealed performance levels dropping back to 2017 levels for pupils in years 3 to 9. The research shows the disadvantage gap has widened from around 7 months to almost 9. That amounts to an average loss of over 4 months of learning in secondary schools and a loss of 2 months in primary. Maths teacher Bobby Siegel says the government needs to do more.
What the government has done in lockdown is they introduced the tutoring fund, spent a lot of money on this, and it was meant to help close the gap. And to be honest, that's an important scheme. And I think they're planning on ending that closing tutoring gap. The most disadvantaged pupils are suffering more. And if we want to make sure students have the basic numeracy skills so they can access, again, applying for jobs and understanding the basics of a payslip, they need those skills. And I think the report today is all about saying, actually, those disadvantaged pupils are falling even further behind.
For all the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
What's the time? 7 minutes past 11. You're with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, coming up, one of the country's biggest girls' football leagues faces being shut down by the FA because they refuse to allow a boy to play in their matches.
You couldn't make this stuff up, could you?
No.
Frankly.
No.
But first, George Galloway, he will be sworn in today as the new MP for Rochdale. Controversy already around that because he was going to be... David Davis was one of the senior Tory MPs was going to introduce him. He's pulled out because of his deputy's views on Gaza and terrorism.
So the seat, of course, where Reform UK Simon Dantock finished rock bottom, was Rochdale with just 6.3% of the vote. We're joined in the studio now by Ben Habib. Can we just first of all ask about this decision by David Davis not to swear him in? I'm surprised by David Davis. You know, as much as you may not like George Galloway and some of the things he stands for, he was democratically elected. Don't they all just have to...
They do.
Get a grip.
They have to swallow it, and they have to accept him into the House of Commons. And the criticism, to the extent they've got criticisms, ought to be aimed at themselves, that they've allowed the country to get to a stage where you could get someone like Galloway getting a thumping majority. It's the Conservatives, I don't want to do any Tory bashing, but it's the Conservatives who've been in office, who've delivered Rochdale to the point that Rochdale is at. And they must bear responsibility for Galloway being elected. You know, Rishi Sunak's speech the other day, a lot of people said it was great. I thought it was vacuous and he missed the point. He celebrated multiculturalism again in his speech. I don't know if you picked that up.
Yeah.
He talked about, you know, celebrating people being Muslim or Hindu, all within the context of the Church of England. Well, of course, you can't do that. You can't be a Muslim and a Hindu in the context of the Church of England. And it was a kind of... he was trying to use language to get away with the multiculturalism to which, you know, Suella Braverman has repeatedly pointed is not working.
No, it's not.
And that's what we've seen in Rochdale. And what Rishi Sunak should have come out and said after that was, look, we've made a mistake in this country. We've got too many immigrants coming in from too many diverse backgrounds. Multiculturalism isn't working. We need to get rid of diversity, equality and inclusion, which is the policy that promotes minority ethnicities and minority religions over and above and to the detriment, in my view, of the majority. DEI's got to go. Everyone in this country is equal. And he could give effect to that policy agenda overnight. He could stop issuing visas for people coming to this country. He could repeal the Equalities Act, which is anything but equal. He could make it illegal to recruit people on the basis of the colour of their skin. All of this could be done overnight. And you would neuter the ability to get someone like Galloway elected in Rochdale. But instead of doing that, they take a ridiculous stance of not swearing him in. He is a democratically elected member of Parliament. He has to be sworn in.
What went wrong with your campaign? Because there was a chance there. You picked Simon Danchuk, a former MP in Rochdale. He was very good on the grooming gangs. But the fact
Local boy.
Yeah, but he was kicked out of his own Labour Party because he sent inappropriate text to a 17-year-old girl. That was never going to wash well with Rochdale's Muslim population, with all the saga of grooming gangs.
Yeah, you know, I mean, sexting a 17-year-old girl is not a great look, to put it mildly, even though it's technically legal, I suppose, which is why he wasn't charged. But it was a filthy by-election. You know, the whole...
Lots of them are, though, Ben.
Yeah, they are. All by-elections take place in a bad environment. Funnily enough, actually, Rochdale, the incumbent died, so it wasn't as controversial as perhaps Wellingborough, where I stood, and Kingswood, where, you know, someone stood down and cost the Exchequer a huge amount of money. Skidmore, you know, for vanity's sake, as far as I could see, stood down as an MP and caused us over £1 million worth of expenditure as a country because he wanted to leave a few months early. And then before that, obviously, you know, Nadine Dorries' seat was a complex and difficult by-election, as indeed was Tamworth. By-elections take place because something odd has happened. Rochdale wasn't one of those, but Rochdale does bring into stark relief the tearing at the social fabric that we are experiencing as a country. And if we don't get ahead of this problem, we are facing... I've written an article, actually, for GBNews. I don't know if it's going to be published soon. But I think we're facing the extinguishing of the United Kingdom as we know it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, economically, we've got national debt and taxation at a high. GDP is now shrinking. GDP per capita is going down even faster because of immigration. Rampant, unskilled immigration, taking on unskilled labour from abroad is undercutting the United Kingdom's ability to get people into work. We've got 6 million people surviving on universal credit to a greater or lesser extent. So we've got a completely busted economy. And then on top of that, we've got all the tearing at the social fabric that has come through, in my view, this ill-conceived DEI policy, diversity, equality and inclusion, the promotion of minorities to the detriment of the majority in this country. How can that be right? We've got the armed forces recruiting people on the basis of the colour of their skin rather than on whether they can fly a jet properly or fire a shell out of a tank properly. You know, we want the best, doing the best that they're at for this country so the country can do its best so we can prosper.
It's worth pointing out that you say that as the son of a Pakistani origin family, am I correct?
Well, my dad's Pakistani Muslim. My mother is a white Christian, English, born and bred. And I'm proud of my Pakistani heritage. I'm very proud of my Pakistani heritage. But I'm British, and we have to look after the United Kingdom. And first and foremost in that is obviously a healthy and prosperous economy, But fundamental to it is having borders that work. We haven't got borders that work at any level.
If Rishi Sunak had come out and done the sort of speech you were talking about then to criticise mass immigration, how would the media have handled that, though? Because we saw what happened when Suella Braverman said that she thought the multiculturalism hadn't worked. What would the front pages of all the papers cast him as?
Well, I think the Daily Mail would have been rather pleased because we've been attacking high levels,
well, let me tell you,
unsustainable levels of immigration for a long time in my view.
BBC wouldn't report it like that. GBNews might report it like that. But I don't think you'd find any other channel do anything other than clutch their pearls and take a deep breath.
I mean, I've given up looking at what mainstream media say, but the reason Labour Party won Tamworth, Mid-Bedfordshire, Kingswood, Wellingborough is because the Tory vote is staying at home. Yeah. The centre-right, small c vote, the people who believe in the United Kingdom, who are proud of the Union flag, who want this country to operate as a settled social construct, as a prosperous social construct, that vote is staying at home. If Rishi Sunak made that speech, if he enacted the policies which would take 5 seconds for him to enact, there would be a chance of a thumping majority at the next election. It's not for me to advise Rishi Sunak. I'm deputy leader of Reform UK. But I can tell you he wouldn't have lost those by-elections and the country would be in much better shape. We'd be on a much better trajectory. And can I also say, as someone who is half Pakistani people, Pakistani extract people, people from India who are now British citizens, don't want to be told that they need a special leg up in society, that they need diversity, equality and inclusion policies to be promoted. That is incredibly patronising and critical of ethnic minorities. People who come to this country want to succeed on their own merit. Meritocracy should be at the heart of everything. All other policies which seek equal outcomes rather than equal opportunities should be binned.
Let me ask you, because Lee Anderson, who's been suspended from the Tory party because what he said about Islamism and as Mayor of London, but he would agree with a lot of what you said.
Yeah.
Is he going to be recruited by Reform UK?
Well, I can't. I mean, it's an open secret. I mean, it's an open secret, so I think I can say discussions have taken place. Yeah. You know, they met famously.
Do you think he should join Reform UK?
Well,
I've written in the Daily Mail today that you're not exactly a fan of his.
Well, I'm very circumspect of taking on, if I may say so, any Tory MPs, because it is the Tory MPs collectively who've delivered the country to the position it's at. I love what Suella says. I love what Priti says. Jacob Rees-Mogg couldn't say anything wrong, but when they get into office, they don't do as they say. And so any Tory MP wishing to join Reform UK, great. Obviously, great, you know, we'll have a chat. But we would need to be very confident that they are solid people of integrity who actually believe what they say and will deliver for the country. That it's not just a mechanism of avoiding being obliterated at the next election, which is where I think the Conservative Party is going.
And the issue for a new party like Reform UK is gaining prominence and awareness in the minds of the public who may not know who you are, they may not know who you represent. And when they see that Lee Anderson is one of your MPs, they might go, oh, that's the guy, the anti-Islam guy, that's what that party are. So he would come with a PR risk, wouldn't he?
I mean, one of the things, I'm not changing the subject, I'll come back to that, but one of the things the Brexit Party got so right was, or got correct, rather, was that it wasn't, no one could pin it as being a right-wing, swivel-eyed, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, fringe, racist party, because we actually were from multiple ethnic backgrounds. We came from all different walks of life, and we were a fantastic force with which to be reckoned, and we won that thumping, majority in the European elections in 2019. And Reform UK should, in my view, emulate that model. You know, we speak for everyone in the United Kingdom. We speak for the British people. We speak for the United Kingdom itself. And we make policies unashamedly for the national interest. That's what we are. And I think anything that detracts from that is a risk.
OK, thank you, Ben. Always good to see you. Ben Habib, their Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Well, Labour's Liz Kendall, she's still talking. She is. No. Well, you know, we said she was setting out her plans to help young people get back into work. She's targeting the 16 to 24-year-olds, not in education or employment. There she is. She's now having a chat to somebody. We will try and surmise what it is that she's promising for that generation.
A new career service, apparently.
Apparently,
Schools.
yep.
Is that it?
Maybe. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
we're always told that there is a huge need for care workers in Britain. We're always told that the salaries just aren't big enough against the benefit system for British people to want to do that work. And there probably is some real truth in that. And yet, if up to 25% of those that come are acting illegally, and it would seem, up until now, that in some areas, foreign care workers come in, but bring in almost the same number of family members with them, that we need to have a proper debate about this. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Padgham, chair of the Independent Care Group. If I accept those arguments for a moment, how can it be that the system is so lax that up to 25% are found by the Inspector of Borders and Immigration to be working illegally?
Well, good evening to you, Nigel. It was good to join you. I mean, those figures are shocking to me. When I looked at it today, when I saw that 275 visas had been issued to a care home that didn't even exist, and a further over 1,000 people joined a company that only had previously 4 staff in it, it makes me wonder the bureaucracy of the Home Office didn't think to check that these companies exist in the first place, because it should be quite straightforward. If people are providing care, they're regulated by the Care Quality Commission. It's a simple phone call to check and double check. Sadly, there seems to have been very many loopholes at the beginning. I believe that's been tightened now, but I can't understand it, because all the providers that are doing it in the proper way have to go through quite a rigmarole to actually get approved, and it takes months. So it beggars belief that this has happened and people have been approved for a company that doesn't even exist.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're on the telly, Andrew Pearce. It's 11:21. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and the slightly badly behaved Andrew Pearce.
Not for the first time.
We're joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Larsson and writer and columnist Emma Wolfe. Now, the former Home Secretary Priti Patel was on breakfast early this morning talking about migration. Here's what she said.
I actually think, I found the whole issue very disappointing right now. We saw another tragedy yesterday, in the Channel, which was just appalling, and I think it could have been prevented. I do think the French should do a lot more, quite frankly. We're paying them, I think, record sums of money. The sad thing is, I look back on all of this, we had a plan. We had a plan called the New Plan for Immigration, linked to the Rwanda policy, building Greek-style reception centres. And I'm sorry to say this, but people that came in afterwards, and in fact the current government, didn't support that plan. And all we've seen with the revolving door is people coming in with new ideas, and that doesn't embed with enough time, proper structural plans and structural reform that's required, including the lawyers, the legal profession. I put forward the one-stop shop, Eamon, where basically you no longer see, or you shouldn't see, asylum seekers going back to the courts again and again and again, appealing their cases. That still hasn't been fully implemented.
A much underrated politician, in my opinion, Emma Wolfe. When I met Priti Patel, I did say to her, I said, I didn't think I was going to like you, and I like you enormously. She's so much better than the public perception of her.
I think the opposite. I think the opposite. Really? I don't think she's very... How do I say this? I
I was actually underwhelmed with her.
Really?
I'm always underwhelmed with her because I agree with her on a lot of things. But she's not sharp. She doesn't have the facts and figures. She's very wishy-washy. She's one of these politicians that says all the right things. But actually, when you drill down, I don't think there's that much substance behind Priti Patel.
I don't see an awful lot of
Compared to Suella Braverman, for example, who I think is extremely intelligent.
OK, Matthew?
I think she's very charismatic.
Pretty. Yeah, and actually, when you meet her, she's very charming. I know what you mean, Bev. But I am going to say it. You know, she diagnoses the problem, but she was there meant to be putting the solutions in place. She signed the deal with France. That's meant to be got a lot of money for nothing.
She'll tell you privately, the Home Office tied her hands at every opportunity, the civil servants at every opportunity. They never wanted the Rwanda thing.
Well, the Home Office is, as we know, I mean, John Reid, Labour's John Reid, 20 years ago said it was not fit for purpose. Absolutely. And it should. I mean, frankly, if I'd been in government, I would scrap it and create a safety department, you know, to look after the police and fire service.
When she was accused of bullying her immigration, I thought, good. You should be bullying because they're useless and they don't do their job properly. And Boris stuck by her when she was accused of...
And it's going to be a big issue, the state of the Home Office and the civil service reluctance in there for Labour, because it's not going to be leaping for joy at what Labour wants to do on immigration either.
What was also quite refreshing, though, listening to her talk this morning, she's obviously very relaxed here, chatting to Eamon and Isabel, is that she wasn't entirely saying that she wasn't saying her government has got it all right. She was saying, I share your frustrations. That's a very brave interview to give in an election year.
Yeah, but she doesn't have much, you know, she doesn't have much to lose, does she? I mean, she's only saying what the majority of the British public agree with.
Well, they failed on immigration.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly, they have absolutely failed. I mean, the Home Office, we keep saying it's not fit for purpose, but over the last few months, the scandals that we've seen, their lack of ability to manage the visa system, the immigration system, really fundamental.
And you can do proper deals with France, because Labour got the Sangatte migrant camp closed in Calais, which was the one that was causing all the grief, the first wave of this 15 years ago.
We've got in the House of Lords this week, Rwanda is back.
Yes, it is.
On that.
Ping pong.
And they are still claiming flights are going to take off.
Well,
and it just
told me last week,
unlikely.
if they get it through the Lords this week, there could be a flight to Rwanda by the end of March.
And that's why some people think there may be an election. Yeah, exactly. I think I don't think there's going to be a May election, because I think that isn't going to be enough when the Tories are as far behind as we see them. I mean, the poll we saw this morning may be an outlier, but they're still in the mid-20s at best.
On Wednesday, Matthew, will transform everybody's life.
Absolutely, because I mean that 1p off national insurance, while millions are paying higher rate tax. And actually, I think the thresholds thing is so serious because it disincentivises people to get on. And if Labour had done it, it would have been crucified.
And teachers and nurses are getting caught into
exactly. Do you remember that? I mean, Andrew, you and I are old enough to remember those ads in 1992 when for John Major, Labour's double tax whammy, and it was pictures of police officers, teachers, nurses, builders, all being hit by Labour's tax, and it's the Tories have hit them by making them higher rate tax.
Even so, a penny here, a penny there. We know the fact is everybody, well, not everybody, people are feeling poorer. People are poorer. Their bills are soaring. Their pay has not gone up. It's not going to make any difference.
And
even if a Rwanda flight takes off, give me a break. You think anybody is going to change their mind?
Anybody think we're going to have a May election?
Wager no one will change their mind.
No.
Yes, I would.
I had money on a May election, but I'm being...
You wish you hadn't now.
Advised.
Well, looking at the polls, though, now...
It's a fiver, actually. Mad.
Listen, can we talk about this story? This is amazing. University of Florida has become the first university, pretty much, I think, in the world, particularly in the Western world, to eliminate all diversity, equity and inclusion positions, rules, ethos, ideology.
Can we bring this instantly to this country?
Matthew.
And bring it into government.
What do you make of it?
Well,
a backward step.
I think it is a backward step to get rid of all. I know. You've got to have a range of views to get rid of all of them. I think that in America sometimes it's gone too far, and I believe in freedom of speech. I think that diversity and inclusion is important, but it shouldn't be a tick box exercise. What really annoys me is when it isn't integrated into the company. When it's like, oh, we'll employ somebody and they can do a nice thing thing once a year, but actually it should be ingrained in all of the way that all our companies and organisations work.
The roots of diversity, equality and inclusion, that whole movement, of course that was positive and it was laudable at the time, but this has gone way too far. Let's stop obsessing about people's race, about their gender, about what's in their underwear, about their sexuality. I don't care. I don't want anyone employed or promoted or, you know, whatever.
I don't believe in quotas.
Let's treat people as people. This has gone out of control.
What about gender pay gap, Emma?
Yeah, what about that?
Gender pay gap?
What about the genuine...
We will still do the same job as the men and we will get paid less.
Of course we will. The diversity training makes no difference to that.
No, that is your equality part.
Exactly. It's not all about diversity training. It should be about ensuring that companies close the gender pay gap, that the glass ceilings are removed, that impediments are removed. And, you know, this is across the whole thing. It's about race, but it's also about disability and gender.
One of the biggest employers of diversity departments. You couldn't get a more diverse employer than the NHS.
Wildly diverse. Well, that's because mostly we don't have enough UK workers to fill it. But yeah.
Nevertheless, it's the point, isn't it? And why are we wasting money in the NHS on diversity training where we can't get people's hips fixed?
What this policy in America is basically saying under Ron DeSantis is that the equality war has been won, that we now have equality across the board. So if a black woman walked into a job, she would get the same opportunity as a white man.
Well,
but all the evidence is that isn't the case.
Untrue.
Yeah, exactly.
That's patently untrue.
Exactly.
But actually, But my sense also, if you look at this data, that is patently untrue. But my sense, Emma, is that it has somehow gone too far.
Yes, it has, Bev. And there are times when, as a white middle-class person, you are discriminated against. So actually,
and heterosexual too.
I just want to get back to a state where we can focus on how good people are and we can value them for the work that they do.
But you say get back to, that place never existed.
Exactly. Exactly. Because of course there've been prejudice in the workplace and there have been barriers in the workplace. I mean, you know, I remember when I went to my careers fair, talking of careers teachers this morning, I quite fancied being a diplomat. I'm not sure how well that would have gone. And there was the brochure when I was at my careers fair at 15 saying, oh, you know, we don't employ any homosexuals. You know, and this is in my, you know, exactly. So I'm saying things not that long ago. I'm not that old, Andrew. But so what we're saying is that life has...
Don't employ any homosexuals. Have they never heard of Burgess?
Well, I think it might have been here sort of...
the most famous
it may have been trying to... After the horse has bolted. Yes. No irony there. Yes, exactly. Some irony there. But I think maybe they thought they had too many. But you know what I'm saying is barriers have been there. Historic barriers have been there.
Yes, and I'm not saying we should row back on that progress. That progress was incredibly important. My point is we have gone down the rabbit hole with this stuff. I mean, I cannot go across a road crossing in my neighbourhood of London without a rainbow hitting me in the face.
A rainbow.
You know, when I don't want my bank telling me, or telling me about their diversity training.
It will be interesting to see what happens in Florida. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the data as this moves forward.
Wouldn't it be a brave university that does it here?
Oh,
yes.
They just
Andrew.
Well, it'll be about funding, won't it? They won't, because it will be about funding. Right, Tatiana Sanchez has been waiting very patiently for us. Here she is with your headlines.
Good morning, it's 11:31. These are your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor's under growing pressure to lower taxes, with the former Home Secretary Priti Patel saying voters need their money back. Income tax has reached an historic high, and while promising some cuts, Jeremy Hunt has been trying to temper expectations ahead of Wednesday's budget. Today, he's announced £360 million worth of funding for manufacturing to help boost the economy. Dame Priti Patel told GB News the government can't keep on borrowing and it needs to be more cautious when it comes to spending.
We have over 500,000 civil servants. Now, even to shave a degree off that would cut public expenditure by at least £1 billion, and that would be great. Back again in 2010, 2016, we had I think around 400,000 civil servants, and that saved a significant amount of money. The spending, the costs alone, I think, came down to something like £11 billion. This is where we have to be again, to be an agile government that's fit in the sense of financially sound money, conservative principles, but actually making sure the public keep more of their money.
George Galloway is due to be sworn in as the new Rochdale MP later. Arriving at the Commons this morning, he was asked how he feels about his comeback.
Well, I'll tell you once I've been inside. I always loved the building. The people in it, not quite so much.
The Workers' Party of Britain leader won last week's by-election by more than 5,500 votes. The focus of his campaign was the ongoing war in Gaza, warning Sir Keir Starmer that Labour would pay a high price for enabling what he says is a catastrophe. Mr Galloway was a Labour MP for 16 years. He was suspended from the party in 2003 over remarks made at the start of the Iraq War. And pupils from low-income backgrounds in England are still behind in their maths grades compared with before the COVID pandemic. A new think tank report has revealed performance levels dropping back to 2017 levels for pupils in years 3 to 9. The research shows the disadvantage gap has widened from around 7 months to almost 9. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2677 and €1.1678. The price of gold is £1,644.78 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,646 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
They're here up at noon. Good afternoon, Britain, with Tom and Emily. So, what's coming up?
We are indeed. Well, in our time on air, George Galloway will be sworn in with his buddy Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, it's interesting when an MP, of course, is introduced to the House of Commons, they have to have two people either side introducing. There's been a bit of controversy. There was some suggestion that David Davis, the veteran Conservative,
he told me he was.
And then he backed out of it over the weekend. So now, Sir Peter Bottomley, the father of the House, the longest-serving MP, is doing it sort of by tradition. But on the other side, Jeremy Corbyn. So it will be interesting to see the atmosphere in the House of Commons as this happens.
If he'll be jeered, which would be incredibly childish if they do.
He may well be.
They're always childish.
They're always. What will be interesting is how many allies he finds in there. Because there may be more than you think.
And will he swear on a Bible or a Quran? Lots of different questions.
And where's he going to sit? Who wants... nobody will want
so,
to
of
be
course,
sitting next to
the last Parliament he was in, from 2012, the last by-election, through to 2015, when he lost his seat in Bradford West, he used to sit up at the back, sort of behind the SNP benches,
that's what I thought.
which is also where Jeremy Corbyn now sits. So they could be sitting buddy-buddy together.
They're old mates.
Will he have his hat on?
This...
Is he allowed to wear his hat in the House?
Hats off strangers.
He's had the hats on. Is that right?
He's going to want to make the most of the next few months, however long it is between now and the election.
Break with convention. The maiden speeches tends to be uncontroversial. His will be the opposite. He won't do it today, but when it comes, it will be a humdinger.
Yes, certainly.
He's a brilliant speaker.
But of course, this all comes into the context of what the government is doing to challenge extremism on the streets and in our politics. And we're going to be discussing what the definition of extremism is, because this is what the government is looking to change for the first time in a decade. What other moves are going to emanate from the Prime Minister's landmark speech on Friday?
It's interesting. Chris Packham has come out and said that no, groups like Just Stop Oil should always be allowed to protest outside MPs' homes. So that's quite interesting. But also, one other story that you may or may not have seen yet is the Church of England. The row over slavery reparations continues. They've been told by a report that they commissioned themselves that £100 million is not enough. Instead, they have to raise £1 billion to atone for their historic
Be careful
wrongs.
what you wish for.
It gets
to
a bit like Austin Powers, doesn't it? Where you sort of have Dr. Evil going 1 billion, squillion, for fillion, a million. I mean, it's all just pretend
where are they
money
going
at
to
this
get that
point.
sort of money from?
Well, I have no idea, but hopefully they're raising it rather than taking it out
You'd
of...
think that some church roofs would be fixed before they sort of got to sending...
Yes, the parishes are furious.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's just more wokery by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah. OK, Emily and Tom for 3 hours from midday. For now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Is a debate on gender really a far-right issue?
Far right. I'm so bored of that phrase, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks about... anyone who acknowledges that there are two sexes is suddenly far right, because that's what Hitler and Mussolini were all about. This question from Shirley is, of course, about Labour. They've been accused of being undemocratic because they pressured a pub into cancelling a debate, and this debate features Kelly J. Keane, who's been on this show a couple of times, and she's a campaigner, and she was just on the panel, and then they got a letter saying that they couldn't do it because Kelly J. Keane apparently attracts far-right groups. Now, they've tried this trick before, but because some awful, ghastly neo-Nazi types turned up near to an event that she was holding in Australia, they kind of tried to blame that on her and suggest that the two were the same thing. They weren't. That was an opportunistic group turning up to... They're not... Neo-Nazis aren't pro-feminist. They're not pro an event called Let Women Speak. That's just ridiculous.
New Zealand's TV blurred her touching her zip because they said that her touching her zip was a far-right dog whistle because she's making that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting a zip.
Yeah, and also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting a top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly... Yeah. I mean, this is stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's so not far right.
But also, even if she were right-wing, which she isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you
well,
if
no,
you say
they
that,
won't,
will they?
they
Because
won't.
you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, I'm the unfashionable workplace.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:40 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. So we're going to hear what the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has to say ahead of the budget on Wednesday, for which I bet you can hardly wait.
I believe that if you look around the world, the countries which are growing the fastest, whether it's North America or Asia, have lower taxes because that makes a more dynamic, more energetic, more entrepreneurial economy. So we do want to move to a lower taxed economy, but we're only going to do so in a way that is responsible and recognises that there are things that taxes pay for, that we couldn't cut taxes by borrowing. We'll do so in a responsible way, but if we can spend money on public services more efficiently, then that will mean less pressure on taxpayers.
You're reportedly going to crack down on non-doms. Have you run out of your own ideas? Are you setting traps for Labour? Why are you pinching Labour policies?
You'll have to see on Wednesday precisely what I'm going to announce. But let me be clear, there is a plan for growth compared to the Labour Party that has just had to abandon the central plan they had for growth, this 28 billion number that one day they were supporting, the next day they weren't. Our plan is working. We've halved inflation. We have 800 more people in work for every day Conservatives have been in office since 2010. More jobs, more investment, lower inflation. We are laying the foundations for long-term growth.
And finally, we've seen public outrage at the post office scandal. Contaminated blood victims have been waiting decades longer. The government was advised to pay out last year, and yet it's still not happening. Are you delaying to help you fund these tax cuts that we hear are coming?
I am personally committed to paying the victims of the contaminated blood scandal as quickly as possible. I was the health secretary that set up the inquiry. I've given evidence to the inquiry twice. It is an appalling scandal, and the government will not do anything to stand in the way of payments being made as quickly as possible when the inquiry has concluded its results.
But Sir Brian Langstaff of the inquiry said you could start making payments straight away. Why is that not happening yet?
Sir Brian Langstaff has said that he will report his findings on the 20th of May, and the government wants to give its response to that as quickly as possible, because this is an appalling scandal and we need to pay the families any compensation they own as quickly as possible.
Chancellor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you for coming down.
Well, there we are, Jeremy Hunt gearing up with that sort of slightly lack of...
Do you know, there was a time when
humanism.
you never saw or heard a word from the Chancellor in the month before a budget. It was called Purdah Nothing. And now he's everywhere.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff that's been in the budget we already know.
I'll be in Whitehaven on Wednesday, as will Michelle Dewberry, as will Nigel Farage. Andrew will be in Westminster for Budget Day. If you are there, do come and say hello to me, and I can interview you on the telly. Now, first of all, one of the biggest girls' football leagues in the country faces being shut down for refusing to allow a boy to play in their matches.
The boys' parents asked the West Riding Girls League if their son could join, as he didn't want to play with other boys and they were worried about his ability level, honestly.
Well, joining us now is Director of Campaigns Sex Matters, Fiona McKenna. Good morning, Fiona. It's really disappointing, this story, isn't it? Because effectively what this mother of this boy is saying, well, he's not good enough to play in the boys' league, so I want him to play in the girls' league. And I don't think anybody wins in that situation, particularly not the boy. Maybe his parents are saying, you're not good enough, go and play with them.
Yeah, and what we understand is he's been playing with girls for a while, but that's just storing up trouble, because sooner or later he has to let the girls have their own teams in their own league. You know, the girls' teams are there for them. When boys and girls play football together, we often hear that the boys don't pass to the girls. There are good reasons for having girls sports separately. So this is just storing up trouble. It makes no sense at all. And there already is a mixed league. So girls who want to play with boys and boys who want to play with girls have a place to go. This is the girls' league. It's for the girls who chose not to play with boys. So it's really outrageous that they're being put under pressure. And it's a kind of emotional blackmail on them.
I'm surprised they agreed to allow the boy to play in the first place, Fiona. They could have just said very politely, this is a girls' team and it's only going to be played with girls.
Well, I think that illustrates the pressure that girls can be put under, Andrew. You know, this has come to light now because this boy wants to play competitively with all these other teams in the league. But presumably there's already a set of girls who either really felt or felt they had no choice but to say it was okay.
Sorry to interrupt you first. So this child is practicing with the girls, is that right? And is doing the training with them, but they don't want him to play competitively in the matches?
Well, I don't know the full details, but what I know is the justification that was given to the other teams in the league was that he had already been playing with girls for a while.
Right.
Now, to me, that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And the fact they had to have a special meeting to ask only proves that it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to have meetings for anyone else.
Yeah. It would be outrageous if they're suspended.
Yes, it would be outrageous. But I think it does show the sort of contradiction that arises when you start to break down some simple rules. You know, the FA already allow men who say they're women, if they claim a trans identity, they're already allowed into women's leagues. And we know the problems that has caused and continues to cause. This boy, I don't believe, is claiming a trans identity, but it's no different.
I would be furious. Thank you, Fiona. We've got to move on. I'd be furious if basically that boy would take a place in his girls' team.
Exactly.
And it's hard enough to get girls to stick with sport when they become young women anyway, as it is. So after threatening West Riding Girls League with suspension, the FA have released this statement. West Riding FA is working with the relevant league and associated clubs on this matter, and we will continue to support them so that an appropriate solution can be found for all.
We want to ensure everybody has the opportunity to play junior football, including with the mixed teams, if that's the best option.
We have rules in place, they go on, which are designed to create opportunities for boys and girls to play football together and ensure no child feels excluded from our game. And I would include in that the girl who wants to play on the team who might get excluded because of the boy. And it seems...
It's a girls' league.
And it's appropriate that I'm wearing my new necklace today that says womanhood is a birthright on my necklace. Right, still to come.
Football's gone mad.
It's National Butchers Week. Do you know which singer butchers like best, Andrew?
Just don't say Meatloaf.
Meatloaf didn't write it. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Yeah, so describe the contents of the letter for us, because it is quite strongly worded, isn't it? And it suggests that your property is empty. And what do they suggest it's going to be used for?
They say, as part of this process, Northamptonshire Council is identifying empty properties and sites within the area, with the aim of encouraging owners to bring premises back into use or to find alternative options for derelict sites. The resettlement team in Northamptonshire Council supports asylum seekers and refugees across 3 different projects: Homes for Ukraine, Afghan resettlement and asylum dispersal. At present, we are seeing a considerable increase in positive immigration decisions being made in favour of asylum seekers. So basically, they're wanting accommodation. But who goes around and assesses whether these properties are lived in or they are actually empty?
Clearly, Ted, no one had bothered to come and look at your house at all, had they?
What do you want now? Because clearly you are both very shaken by this letter, and that letter that you've received in response has not gone far enough. Do you want an apology? What more do you want to see?
Well, she said here that she's, you know, I sincerely apologise, this Lindsay Bellchambers, but I don't see, there was no explanation as to how they've come to say this property was empty, whether it was disused, whether it was unkempt, or what. If you go back through the history of the property, it's not been empty.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Now the week you've all been waiting for, it is National Butchers Week. Bev and I are big fans of butchers.
That's right. This is a time to celebrate the skill and craftsmanship of our butchers. But can people afford to go to their butchers anymore? Where do you get your lamb chops from? Well, joining us is our reporter, Anna Riley. Good morning, Anna. We neglect our butchers at our peril, don't we? We see them closing on our high street and we have to go and buy the cheaper meat from the supermarkets, but I think it's a very high price to pay.
Good morning, Bev and Andrew. Well, yes, butchers are a staple of our high street. It's a trade that goes back to the Middle Ages, and we've got over 5,600 butcher businesses in the UK, and it is one that we want to see continuing. Compared to going to a supermarket to buy your meat, you can get so much more at your local butchers. You've got that customer facing role, so you can the butcher can can really get to know you, you can really get to know your local butcher, you get good value for money as well, because you're not buying pre-packaged meat like you are at supermarkets. You can buy exactly what cut you want and exactly how much meat you want to buy, which helps us while we're struggling financially at the moment. And it also helps the local businesses in the area, and it also supports local farmers as well. You're not buying meat, say, from New Zealand when you go to a supermarket. You're buying locally sourced meat from local farmers. I'm here in Hull. I've been speaking to Dean Dixon. He owns Dixon's Brothers Butchers, a business that's been going since 1950, and this is what he had to say.
I think the main thing for a local butcher is you can get what you want. You're not getting a pack size that's stipulated to you by the supermarket. If you want 2 rashers of bacon, you come in and get two rashers of bacon. If you want 4 sausage, you get 4 sausage. If you want 3/4 pound of mince, you get 3/4 pound of mince. So you're not stuck to the stipulation of sizes that they do in their packs, which can then obviously cut down on waste for you using it and expense, because you're not buying things you don't need.
So Dean there just telling the benefits of going to your local butcher and supporting the local economy. I asked him as well, with the Chancellor's spring budget coming up on Wednesday, what he wants to see, and he said he wants to see more support for local businesses, local butchers like himself, to keep high streets thriving.
Thank you, Anna Riley there. Honestly, I went to the Britwell Salome farm shop on Saturday, and that point that the butcher made then, you don't have to go in and buy a load of bacon if you just want a few rashers. So actually you end up throwing less food away. So even though it might be more expensive per kilo, maybe because you know where it's come from and it's healthy and it's well reared, you probably don't waste
but
as
also
much
they
as you
can
might
cut
at
you
home.
the joint you want, and also they tell you how long to cook it for.
Yep. I got some lovely sausages, I got some bacon, and do you know what I've got a renewed appreciation for? This might surprise you. Black pudding. I've recently developed a taste for black pudding.
I don't like black pudding.
I thought you might say that.
No, I know it's a northern delicacy.
And on that
I
bombshell...
thought you were going to say faggots. Well, it's a delicacy,
It's Tom Harwood.
Andrew, I can't believe you there. But also, my goodness, black pudding is delicious and you should try some sometime. But we're going to be moving on from delicacies to the intricacies of what is going on in our politics. Are we safe in this country? The government is looking to redefine extremism to keep those hate preachers off the streets. We'll be looking into all of the detail here on Good Afternoon Britain after this.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Fog this morning clearing away. For most it's a dry and a bright afternoon, but there is rain in the southwest of England and South Wales. From this area of low pressure, the isobars squeezing together as well. So as well as rain, it is also turning windy. Some heavy pulses of rain as well, so not great on the M5 and parts of the M4 as that rain spreads into South Wales later. Ahead of it, for most dry and bright, some fog this morning, but that's clearing away now, and some good spells of sunshine, and temperatures struggling a little bit, still single figures for many, maybe 11 or 12 in the southeast, feeling colder with the wind and the rain in the southwest. Now that rain spreads across all of Wales into the Midlands this evening, parts of southeast England, then to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, easing off as it does so. As it moves through, leaving the moisture behind, it will turn quite murky for a while. Some fog patches, particularly by dawn over parts of the Midlands and eastern England. Turning quite chilly too for Wales and southwest England. Some pockets of frost here on Tuesday morning. Bit of a mishmash then to start Tuesday. Some fog around, but that should clear. Fairly damp over northeast England and eastern Scotland. Staying a bit damp across Aberdeenshire for most of the day. Some showers in the south for parts of Hampshire, moving up towards Kent. 1 or 2 heavy ones possible here. But for many, it'll be a dry and a bright day on Tuesday. And feeling a touch warmer too.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might